You're listening to Now I've Heard Everything, conversations with the icons of our time.
The way we order food in the restaurant business is, as much as we would like you to believe that we're down at the fish market sniffing fish every morning and squeezing vegetables at the produce market, in fact, most of us phone in our orders to answering machines late at night in a semi-drunken state.
Celebrity chef Anthony Bourdain. Today on Now I've Heard Everything, I'm Bill Thompson. Yesterday would have been Anthony Bourdain's 68th birthday. Instead, it was Anthony Bourdain Day, a day in honor of the celebrity chef. Bourdain was executive chef at New York's Les Halles restaurant, but that was not what made him most famous. He rocketed to popularity with his 2001 book, Kitchen Confidential. Then came his show on the Food Network, and then the Travel Channel and CNN. Yet somehow Anthony Bourdain had resisted the idea of putting together a cookbook until 2004, when he published Anthony Bourdain's Les Halles Cookbook. And somehow, in the 20 years since I did this interview, I've managed to forget how witty and charming Anthony Bourdain could be in person. So come with me now back to 2004 and my conversation with Anthony Bourdain.
This is my first cookbook. I resisted the idea for some time, I think, because I just didn't want to write another or produce yet another volume of elegantly bound food porn with pretty pictures that would sit on the cocktail table and never find its way into the kitchen. And I guess also I was wary of getting involved in a cookbook with just a dry recitation of recipes, that sort of omniscient tone that assumes everything will go right for you. And then I realized, that I've been training cooks for 28 years, training dishwashers to become cooks in most cases. And I thought if I used the same combination of sensitivity, diplomatic tone, and brutality, that I might be able to create something useful.
I'm picturing Julia Child in the Marine Corps with this book.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of Full Metal Jacket in this book.
But there are certain essentials that we all have to know if we're going to do any kind of cooking right, whether it's the recipes in this book or recipes in somebody else's book. There are certain things that I didn't realize before. I mean, and I've been cooking a long time. Other people's cookbooks line my shelves, but I'd never realized until you actually spelled it out for me the importance of making sure that I have everything right at hand before I start anything.
Well, much of what's different about this book is not so much the recipes, which are really classic bistro standards, go back decades, if not hundreds of years. Those are very simple, and in most cases the hardest thing about the recipe is pronouncing the name of the dish. But I do try to pass on what is essential to every professional cook from the very beginning. It's what's called mise en place. And it's an attitude adjustment, really. It's arranging your time and your space in a way that best serves your purposes. And the battle is often won or lost long before you begin the actual cooking. But, certain decisions about what dish you're going to be making for guests, how you arrange your ingredients in an organized way so that you will, at the last minute, know where they are, just by virtue of arranging your food into your mise en place, as every professional does at the beginning of every shift. Even if you think you know where the butter and the cream is in your refrigerator, chances are you are suffering from the accumulated detritus of a life. When we start in a restaurant in the beginning of the day, it's a blank space. And I can't tell you how helpful it is just by virtue of arranging all the ingredients you'll need for a particular dish freshly, putting them in places convenient to you or convenient to the dish. You're also at the same time prioritizing, making kind of mental lists and notes, giving yourself something to think about, and also making decisions about how far along can I bring the various stages of the dish before the guests arrive, so you don't find yourself running around like a headless chicken at the last minute.
Plus, if you actually handle the sour cream container before you need it, you'll realize it's a lot lighter than I thought it was. I better go get some more.
Yeah. I mean, food, many dishes, many recipes abhor uncertainty. They sense fear. And they will misbehave. It's like riding a horse when you're just not sure of your abilities on horseback. Certain sauces like hollandaise and béarnaise will mess up on you if you're pushing it, you're uncertain, you're struggling to find your whisk, things like that. It's all over for you then.
Now, is the set of kitchen knives I got at the dollar store, is that going to be inadequate for the task?
You need, I think, all of these recipes were created by simple country people in rural situations who did not have food processors or fancy kitchen equipment. However, I'm betting they had a sharp knife, and that is one of the few essentials that you must have. The dollar knife will not work. You not only have to own a decent knife, comfortable to your hand, but you have to keep it sharp and take care of it. You don't need a whole collection, just one good knife.
I was just going to say, is a knife a knife a knife, or do you need one knife for boning and one knife for slicing, another knife for dicing, and another knife for this and that?
Not really. I mean, it's good to have a serrated knife for certain things, and it's good to have a sharp, straight-edged knife. A boning knife, there are not many dishes in here that call for you to do that kind of work. Chances are, if you're a home cook, you're going to be having your butcher do that.
Am I also going to have to make a long list of things that I'm going to have to drive all over town over a period of 2 days to gather up for these recipes?
Most are very simple, readily available. There are some that do require some thinking, and I mean, the way we order food in the restaurant business is we don't, as much as we would like you to believe that we're down at the fish market sniffing fish every morning and squeezing vegetables at the produce market. In fact, most of us phone in our orders to answering machines late at night in a semi-drunken state. We feel free to do that because over the years we've developed personal relationships with companies, with certain purveyors, and individuals. And cooking at home should be, at best, the same thing. If you like food is important to you, you enjoy doing it, developing those kinds of relationships over time, searching for food is fun and satisfying. And I've had a number of people who've read the book and gone after some of the more difficult to find ingredients and said, well, I couldn't find calves' feet. But in looking for them, going to an ethnic neighborhood and going to the Chinese butcher shop and going to the Spanish language markets, the Asian groceries, I found so many other great things that are also useful. It's an interesting observation, I think, that in order to find so many of the traditional French and Italian ingredients, again and again, you find yourself going to Chinatown or to an Asian community to find them.
Well, that's probably the only place left where you'll find an actual butcher still that you can have an actual conversation with.
It's where you can reliably find those parts that so many of us have forgotten ever existed. And yet these are part of our heritage too. Tripes, shanks. Shoulders.
Well, one of the points you make in this book, which is again something I hadn't really thought of, but you said that many of the great chefs, the great cooks, the great recipes have come from the poorest areas of the country that they're coming from, because that's all the people had to work with. They had to really use their imagination.
Few people chose in the early days of cooking when the average age that a chef died back, even I think as late as the 20s. Was something like 37, 40 years old. Bad air, incredible heat. So, of course, it was not on the top 10 list of occupations for the brightest and best flowers of the generation. Also, what French food shares with other great cooking cultures is that people tend to cook well where they have to cook well. They have no option. There's the where cooks are free, as A.J. Liebling so aptly put it, where cooks are free of the crippling handicap of affluence. It's easy to cook a steak. It's also fairly unsatisfying after you've done it enough times. But to coax flavor and texture out of a shoulder or a neck or a shank, that is something special, and way more often than not, those dishes are far more satisfying, both to chefs and to serious eaters.
And I think one of the points that you're making in this book is that is not a rarefied skill only available to the select handful.
It's nonsense. Most of these techniques, confit de canard, you'll see confit items in very fancy restaurants. But like so many classic techniques, this was developed by hungry people with no refrigeration, desperately looking for a way to preserve meat, game, and poultry by cooking it in its own fat and storing it under fat. Through trial, error, repetition, they develop something truly marvelous and classic. Coq au vin. What is it? Big, tough, old bird, too tough to roast or saute. Well, maybe if I marinate it and slowly simmer it, it will make something good. Coq au vin is now a revered, standard. And of course, the best example, escargot bourguignon. I mean, do you seriously think the first person to eat a snail was a chef? It was one very hungry, some desperate human being thinking maybe if I slather enough garlic butter on that thing, I can eat it.
I often wondered about things like crawling up on the beach after the tide has gone out, and the first human to think, yeah, the thing crawling along there, I bet I could eat that.
Well, I think, what is the greatest, oldest and greatest culinary culture? It's the Chinese. And, you can joke all you want, but the fact is that the Chinese don't look at this is the good part, this is the bad part. They look at, well, that's the easy part to cook. And that's the part that, or the ingredient that we have to either find out what is already good about it that we're missing, or find a way to make it good. And that is always, in every culture, the kind of thinking, the kind of engine that drives great culinary cultures.
Can always be a garnish, if nothing else.
So what I'm saying is that all of these dishes, classic, beloved French dishes were made in, often created in harsh, difficult circumstances by people with, certainly who had never been to culinary school, were in no way artists. So it's well within the reach of anyone who can handle a knife without lopping a finger off.
Do you think we're afraid of failure? If the chicken doesn't come out just right, is this somehow some grave personal affront?
Well, it depends. I mean, you should make decisions. If you're having your boss is over for dinner, there are some dishes that on balance would probably be not a wise thing to attempt first time out. You save that for a guest who've already seen you drunk and naked. You think about dishes with a slightly wider margin for error, a stew, something you can make the day before. Chances are invariably the stew will be better the next day anyway. The flavors marry up. So, you do have to make decisions like that about, what you're going to do. But people are afraid of food in general, ambivalent about food in the English-speaking world for some time. There was this British puritanical sense that taking too much pleasure at the table led to bad character. And now with food as fashion, I think people allow themselves to be intimidated not only by the show business aspects of the restaurant, but perhaps an early traumatic experience at the hands of a snooty French waiter. That just you shouldn't allow that to happen. Cooking should be fun, and it's fun to mess up a little.
You're asking us in this book to put the passion back in our cooking.
Think about food as something fun to prepare and at least, and more importantly, fun to eat. We eat so much out of instinct now, just sort of listlessly, joylessly chawing away at food that is barely food. Potato chips with no potatoes in them, a fast food that provides us that fulfills our expectations reliably, but which in fact, ensures that those expectations are low. All I'm saying is, hey, if you try cooking your own chicken. It's ridiculously easy, it's cheap, and it's fun.
The other day I was at Safeway and I walked past, in the produce aisle, I walked past fresh watermelon. And I'm not that old. I can remember when you could only get watermelon from perhaps May through September.
Yeah.
And now there's slices of fresh water, and it's the week before Thanksgiving. You get big slabs of fresh water. Just because you can get something year-round, does that mean you should get something year-round?
It depends. I mean, I think it's a lot more fun. We're spoiled. We're used to getting things. If I can't get it in season in this area, I can have it flown in from Hawaii. I think one of the reasons that the great food cultures value food so much and treasure it is because, a fresh tomato is something that comes along only a few times, only once a year for a few weeks or months. So you make the most of what you have. So certainly I would always encourage people to eat what's good. In a perfect world, one would eat what is good and seasonal in one's area. But on the other hand, if they're making it real good in Japan and I can have it here tomorrow, don't tell me I can't have otoro tuna, okay? So, I mean, I understand that impulse. I would, however, say that, if you're planning on doing, asparagus, or white asparagus or even green asparagus, and the stuff on the market is clearly not good, well, maybe it's time to consider another dish. It's you shouldn't try to fit the square peg in the round hole. React to the market. Shopping also should be fun.
Will my stuff at home never quite taste exactly the way it does in a restaurant, even if I follow their recipe to the letter?
Well, I think what's missing from a lot of there are a few vital ingredients that you as a home cook tend not to have that we always have in restaurants. One is stock, and heavily reduced demi-glace, which is a reduction of stock and wine, which we make in vast amounts. There is no substitute. I don't care what they tell you in most cookbooks. Beef broth from a can will not do it. Those salty little cubes of bouillon will not do it. I suggest making a big amount of stock, reducing it to demi-glace, and as Julia Child recommends, putting it in ice cube trays, keeping it in the freezer. And when you need something to boost your sauce or your gravy, you have this stuff. It took you, a whole day of essentially hanging around, or even just leaving a big pot on your stove to simmer. It's not a dish that really takes much work. It just takes up a lot of room, and you have to be nearby or checking up on it every once in a while. So on a Sunday, you could basically make enough stock and demi-glace to hold you for months and months. Butter, gotta have it. Can't believe it's not butter. I can't believe it's food. Margarine is just not that's going to ruin your dish from the get-go. Country crock, they're not kidding. Shallots, we use a lot of shallots in our sauces, in our sautéed vegetables. That's an almost ubiquitous ingredient in restaurants that most home cooks, for whatever reason, don't keep on hand and don't buy.
I wonder why that is. They're so easily available.
Yeah, it's beyond me. I think people are just not aware of how frequently that's a standard item on mise en place everywhere. Fresh herbs, whenever possible, is a huge difference. Dry herb is more often than not the sweepings from a stable floor and tastes just as good. You buy like the French buy, meaning you buy enough for the meal and the leftovers, and maybe another meal the next day, and that's it. You don't need to keep this vast supply of food around all of the time. And and there are a few other things, all of them readily accessible. It's so easy. So much of what we do in restaurants is easy. And if I get cranky in the book, it's when I sense that, or I'm aware of people committing food crimes that are so easily avoidable. How hard is it to handle garlic with some kind of respect and love? And yet people persist in doing the most terrible things in the name of garlic.
Anthony Bourdain took his own life on June 8th, 2018, while he was on location in France for his TV show Parts Unknown. Now you can get your copy of Anthony Bourdain's Leal Cookbook by Anthony Bourdain by tapping the link in our show notes or by going to our website, heardeverything.com. We may earn an Amazon commission if you make a purchase. HeardEverything.com is where you can also hear my 1991 interview with celebrity chef Wolfgang Puck.
The best thing about making up a good dish is you get immediate recognition. People tell you, God, this is so wonderful. If you build a house, you have to wait 2 years. They're going to walk in and then I said, yeah, it's wonderful, but the roof leaks.
And my 1999 conversation with the barefoot Contessa, Ina Garten.
I think it's just about taking really good ingredients and enhancing them. That's really what cooking is for me. It's not so much about the art of layering flavors and trying new things.
And of course, we post new episodes of Now I've Heard Everything every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And you can find us everywhere you listen to podcasts. And thank you so much for listening. Next time on Now I've Heard Everything, a leading voice in the LGBTQ plus community, particularly a strong voice for lesbians. But she also became known in later years as a prolific and very popular mystery writer. We'll revisit my 1993 conversation with Rita Mae Brown.
Unfortunately, we have a culture wherein the truth is told with hate and lies are told with love. And we've got to learn to be truthful to one another in ways that bring out the best instead of attacking someone.
That's next time on Now I've Heard Everything. I'm Bill Thompson.